can say or add to the tributes that has already been paid to the late great Kenny McFarland. I miss our early and late night phone calls where I had always said, "Wise owl, I need your advice." His love for his family and his second family, the pride of the Orange and Blue Flute Band, was something I admired and respected. Now as Governor of the Apprentice Boys of Derry, I still always look out for where he stood and recorded the parades, and always give a wee smile across, knowing that he's looking down on us. It was an honour to call Kenny McFarland my friend.
Hard now to make sure that changes, and we're challenging those processions, because I think people are starting to be aware just how positive the bands are and how important they are within our communities.
I met Kenny back in the year 2010 when I was asked to work with the Confederation of Ulster Bands. The Bands Forum had just set up at that time, and all the groups came together, and Kenny was the first person I met in relation to the Londonderry Bands Forum. We hit it off straight away, and I was so privileged to know him for at least 12 years. Kenny always contacted me in relation to my health. He always phoned for a friendly chat, and he always kept in touch with me even after I changed jobs. He is sorely missed, and he was such a massive asset to the marching bands community.
It's taken a long time for people to realise that, this working together is the way to go. It's about making ourselves stronger, and I think the whole, what's happening here in this city, where you have people now marching with different bands, people learning with different bands and going back and taking those skills back to their own band. I think that is so positive, and this, I think it can only thrive because of it.
Kenny was a great friend. I arranged to meet Kenny for a 10-minute chat down at the Solace Centre at Brady. It could last a few hours. He was a great storyteller and a very interesting person to meet.
Knew Kenny for a very long time. We worked together for over 30 years, I would say. Whenever I started up the Villages Together in the mid-90s, it was a bit of a hard push, really. But new buildings came on, and that really helped things, and Kenny was a huge part of that. Kenny became the chair of the Villages Together fairly quickly, and he was just the most amazing person to be working with. He was always, I would have been working there at that stage, and he was always the most protective person and very kind, and looked after me, I always felt, and guided me and gave me the support that I always needed. He was a very understanding person, and he really knew how people worked. And one of the things that I really appreciated about Kenny was that he was a really good ambassador for the community in which he lived. He loved new buildings with all his heart, and he loved the Villages Together, and he loved, of course, he loved the bands. When Kenny was passionate about something, he was really passionate about it, and he loved it. It was always a pleasure. Kenny and I never ever had a cross word in all the years. He was always just so supportive, and as I say, he became a really strong ambassador. He challenged things, he challenged the political establishment. He was one of the first to do that, I think, and really challenged political unionism to do better and do more for the constituency that they represented. So that was for me, that was a revolutionary thing, and to be part of that with Kenny was a real pleasure. I learned so much from him.
Well, this is something I never really wanted to do, but it is important today on the launch of the Exodus project, which is a subject that Kenny and I spoke about for the last 10 or 11 years. I had the privilege of knowing Kenny from 2013 when I got the job at the Londonderry Bands Forum. I'd known him for a long time, but I'd never spoken to him. And I have to say that the last 10 years were some of the most productive of my working life, anyway.
There wouldn't be a Londonderry Band Forum if it wasn't for Kenny. There'll be many things said tonight about Kenny. He was a great storyteller, he was a great laugher, he was generous with his time, and he was very intelligent and forward thinking about what we could do. But I remember the first time I met Kenny about 15 years ago when he told me a story about how the PUL community in Londonderry could have a place to call their own put their arts forward, to promote their arts, to promote their culture, and to be proud of. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're sitting in that venue, the Newgate Arts Centre. Quite simply, this was Kenny's fairy tale, and it wouldn't exist without the drive of him and some others from many years ago. Whilst we all miss Kenny, his legacy will live on forever within this building and in the work that the Newgate Arts Centre and the Londonderry Bands Forum will continue to do.
And when we were in Cullen, we were one of the best marching bands in the town, because we marched up and down the hall just to keep alive. Right? The heat was it was so cold, and the drummers had to go down the stairs, which was even colder than above, for it was all concrete. So you get kept ice cream in it in the middle of the summer, I thought.
My friend Kenny McFarland, what a guy. I remember many years ago, whenever Kenny was working in Call 2000, I remember him saying to me that he didn't want to do things for people. He wanted to help people do things for themselves. And I think Kenny applied that principle throughout his career as a community activist. And he was a community activist, respected by many, not only in the Maiden City, but right across the whole of the province. Marion Jamieson, Charmian Jones, and myself worked with Kenny in the very early days of the Bands Forum. It was fantastic. He was such a guy. You didn't just meet Kenny, you met his whole family. Kenny introduced you to the family. Many as a time he had me down to his house for a meal. It was super. He's a sad, sad loss. However, in saying that, there's a big footprint on the Maiden City that says Kenny McFarland.
Personally, I'm proud every time. I was proud every time I'm out in the band, every time. I'm actually quite proud every time I see the band marching along that line. When they're playing well, it makes me happy. It doesn't matter how many bands go and watch on the 12th of August, if the Orange Blue comes marching past and they're playing well, I'm happy. I'm proud of it. I suppose we all of a legacy. We started in '79 and it's still going on, and it's going well.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the board, staff and volunteers of Newgate's Art and Cultural Centre, we've come together tonight in Newgate during the Festival of Flutes to pay tribute to Kenny McFarland, a visionary, a bridge builder and a tireless advocate for cultural understanding. When I first got involved with Newgate, I met Kenny, Brian, Derek, Kyle, James and Georgina in the old fire station for the first time. I felt like I was being interviewed for MI5. Every time I looked up, there was Kenny, hands folded, eyes fixed, sizing me up. Is she the right fit? What can she bring to the table? What skill has she got? It was clear from the start that this was a group driven by passion, ownership and unwavering commitment. I knew then that this was the right place for me and that it would be a privilege to work alongside them. Kenny was like an encyclopedia and I was like a sponge, eager to absorb everything that I could. That is, until the topic turned to bands and I hadn't got a clue. I was completely lost. Derek and Kenny could talk all night about them. Kenny just wasn't the first chairperson of Newgate, he was one of the founding pillars. He was instrumental, along with Brian and Derek, in establishing the Londonderry Bands Forum in 2010, where he worked to challenge prejudice and misconceptions about the Loyalist Marching Band. But his vision went far beyond that. He was deeply committed to addressing the social and educational challenges facing Protestant, Unionist, Loyalist communities in Northern Ireland. Kenny never followed the expected path. He forged his own, always in pursuit of dialogue, understanding and progress. It is often said here in Newgate that the centre simply wouldn't exist without Kenny's foundational work. He spent countless hours shaping the vision, advocating for its purpose and ensuring it would become a space for creativity, dialogue and transformation. He didn't just build a centre, he gave it life. He believed in it, he spoke for it, and Kenny's legacy lives on in it. Nearly every conversation that takes place within these walls is about Kenny. His aspiration was all for young people to know and embrace their culture with pride. His belief in inclusion, cultural identity, and the unfailing power of the arts remains at the very heart of our own mission. As the chair of Newgate, I am under no illusion I have big shoes to fill, so I'm not even going to attempt to try. However, I am committed and determined and honoured to walk alongside the board, Brian, and all our staff and volunteers to carry Kenny's visions forward with the same integrity and passion he brought to every endeavour. Kenny's impact will be felt for generations. His memory will always be honoured with pride and gratitude and with action. Kenny, it was an honour and a privilege to know you. Sleep tight.
Okay, thank you very much. Hazel's our chair, obviously, of Northwest Cultural Partnership here. And you've, I know Kenny had big boots, Hazel, but you're doing a great job, so don't be worried in that respect. Okay, I mean, before we start here, I just want to, I suppose, thank Andy Lynch from the Londonderry Bands Forum, who's our coordinator, who pulled together all those wonderful testimonies into the short video that kicked off tonight. So could we all give Andy a bit of a round of applause, please, for the work he did. Okay, I mean, I know it's obviously quite a sad night tonight, but also we hope it's going to be an enjoyable night, a fun night, one where I think we can come away kind of proud and glad that we remembered Kenny in a good way. And I'm just thinking, even sitting here now in this wonderful building that we're on, that obviously Kenny was core to, but he'd be thinking himself, because Kenny was the most humble person I know. He'd probably tell us what the hell was all the fuss about. You know, the only time I've actually had an angry word with Kenny, or Kenny had an angry word with me, was whenever I suggested one time that he was going to put his name forward for an MBE, and he nearly had the head off me. But that was the kind of boy that Kenny was. Before we kind of continue here, there was a couple of apologies. Marion Jameson, who was mentioned there by Charmaine in the video, is not too well herself, but is a great friend of Kenny. Was involved in many of our long conversations, and she wanted me to mention that she really hoped that the night went well. And also to Graham Stenhouse, he was a very close personal friend of Kenny's, and who is on our board now at Newgate as well, to send his apologies. Okay, so it's fitting that, as I say, we're going to have this celebration in this wonderful building. Obviously, it's great to see it packed out. Given the demand we had, we could have filled the Millennium Forum, but I think it was important, obviously, that we have it here because this is, as I say, where Kenny's heart lay in terms of the community sector. I want to specifically, first of all, welcome Kenny's family and friends here tonight. To Andrina, Trevor, Kirsty, Natalie, Amy and Callum in particular. It's wonderful to see you here, and the grandchildren as well. So hopefully you can enjoy it. I know it was a wee bit emotional at the start, but hopefully the mood will lift a wee bit as we go on. This is to be a fun night, a joyous night, and a celebration with a wee bit of nostalgia. The bar is open, although we weren't able to find a bottle of VAT 19, Kenny's favourite tipple, so we'll have something else in his memory. We've already had some wonderful testimonies, and I say we do want to lift the mood a wee bit, but hopefully you can indulge me so I can have a few personal reflections myself. So where do you start when you talk about Kenny? As we all know, Kenny was a humble man and a generous man. To me, he was the single most influential person in my career. He was inspiring, pragmatic, clear-minded and strategic. He was more of a friend than a work colleague or a boss. Maybe not so much a father figure, but I saw him very much as a brother. A phone call from Kenny, usually about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, at a minimum, was a better 45 minutes than I ever spent in a classroom in my life. Although, from what I hear, I don't think Kenny spent too many 45 minutes in his classrooms either over the years. He was a pioneer, I think, as Hazel indicated, a pioneer of progressive thinking, a leader who encouraged risk-taking, even if it attracted personal criticism. He wasn't scared to stand up for himself, or the people he was loyal to. He was loyal and fiercely protective of those he cherished and of those passions he held dear, and Kenny had many. First and foremost, it was his family. He was extremely proud of his family, his sons and daughters, his in-laws and his grandchildren. He could talk for hours about bands, as Charmaine said, who were particularly his pride and joy, the pride of the Orange and Blue Flute Band in New Baltons, which he was a member of and founder member from 1979. He was a proud New Baltons man, although as a member of Curry Free Orange Lodge, I would like to claim part of him as one of our own. In New Baltons, he helped establish the community centre, and I say it's great to see people like Alison here tonight and Lynn and Ruth, you'll hear more from later on, who were instrumental in building that community infrastructure way back kind of in the late 90s. He established that community infrastructure from then on, and to say never shirked responsibility even in terms of social issues in New Baltons. He was very much a mediator, was Kenny, and was able to do it in a way that completely influenced people. He was described once as a quiet peacemaker. Indeed, when you cast your eye over the development of the unionist areas in the city, and as Martin Snodden said in his testimony, Kenny has his fingerprints and footprints firmly in everything you see in unionist areas here. With villages together, with the rural area partnership in Darien, it's good to see Philip here today as well, where Kenny worked just before he died. The Solar Centre, of course, where he was inspiration to James and Georgina and everyone out there. The COG Community Group, where he worked for a number of years as well. And the Londonderry Bands Forum, of course, and of course here at Newgate. But it was his love of marching bands, and more broadly for the unionist community, to which I really got to know Kenny. As a product of a Protestant exodus, he became a fierce advocate of equality. He fought relentlessly against the demonisation of unionist culture. As quite rightly reflected in the testimonies we've heard, without Kenny there would be no Londonderry Bands Forum nor Newgate Arts Centre. He was a strategist who hated negativity and wouldn't entertain moaning unless he had a solution. Yet his ethos was one of collaboration, partnership and respect for other traditions. Kenny broke many glass ceilings, particularly during UK City of Culture, and afterwards with his truly astonishing leadership, his risk-taking and his diplomacy. Failed by the education system, he put an onus on self-learning. His broad knowledge and attention to detail made him a formidable force. Never enter a meeting unprepared was Kenny's mantra. In latter years, he became an effective policy influencer and unofficial special advisor to many of our local elected representatives. First and foremost, I think he took great pride in seeing young people progress, and took particular great delight in seeing the creativity of the people here at Newgate and Souls. Kenny wanted his community to be ambitious. He wanted us to think big. He wanted people to aspire. He hated the unionist community underselling itself, what he called the poverty of aspiration. Kenny was generous with his time and knowledge, a great communicator, a storyteller, and as we'll hear later from some of those friends who cherished him. Kenny had great clarity of thought and an amazing ability to untangle the most complex and challenging of issues. I will cherish the phone conversations we had, because after a phone call from Kenny, I always came away far better informed. And I hope tonight does Kenny justice. Anyway, less of the church vibe, let's get more onto the pub vibe. Tonight, I hope by the end of it you'll agree, we have compiled a celebration of some of those passions that Kenny held dear: culture, community, and storytelling. So to kick off, our first performance tonight is from a couple of local staff members here at Newgate that Kenny had a lot of time and respect for. As I say, we have a very creative team here at Newgate, and what we're going to hear from tonight are primarily from two of those. Darren Mulligan, Darren's our program executive here, and Richard Laird, who works here as well. And they're going to play some of the music that Kenny loved, some of the contemporary music that Kenny loved to play. Hope you enjoy.
Thanks very much, Brian. So I used to work in the office in the Soul Centre with Kenny, and many hours were spent listening to music and going down the rabbit hole of YouTube. We would listen to one group and then we would listen to the next group and the next group and the next group, and I don't think there was that much work actually done, but he was one of the guys that always kind of pushed us, I suppose, as writing music and creating music. And I suppose the time we formed Santos, he was always the go-to man. You'd always let him hear a bit of music and say, Kenny, what do you think of this? And if he started whistling and tapping his foot and banging on the table, you knew that, right, that's a goer, that's the one we liked. And he was always supportive of us, especially when we played in Santos. And many times he sent me videos of the grandkids dancing around the living room when Flub It Up was on, and he says, what have you done to my house? But I'm going to start off with a tune that I wrote, and actually that Kenny was probably one of the first people I actually let him hear the tune, and I was really struggling for a name for the tune, and he says, what about Tears for the Fallen? It was actually a tune I wrote when I came back from the sun after a trip, and he says, Tears for the Fallen. He was always great with tune names and names, and any project names and stuff like that. Kenny was always the go-to man. You would ask, what do you think of this, Kenny? And he'd give us approval or come up with some really good ideas. So this one stuck here. So this is Tears for the Fallen, which Kenny made. Thanks very much. Like I said, I kind of good taste in music, and we had a few kind of not arguments, but kind of debates about music. And I obviously playing the bagpipes and the whistles. I love Scottish traditional music and Scottish folk music, and Kenny had a wee taste for that too, and he introduced me to this band called Pete and Diesel, and I heard them, and they're just quite mad, but this is one of my main aims of the job here in Newgate, was to get Pete and Diesel to play on the stage, so I'm still trying my best, but hopefully, definitely one day we'll have him playing on the stage, and that'll be a tribute to Kenny, no doubt. This next tune, the next song we're going to do with Richard's going to sing is one of Kenny's favourites as well, by Runrig, and I'm sure you've all heard it before, and please join in the chorus as well, and this is called Every River.
Suicide of the heart, and you ask me to play this game without question, risks and the stakes, the shotgun roulette. Every river I try to cross, every hill I try to climb,
suppose from us from a musical point of view, I don't think there's no finer tribute to Kenny than actually writing a tune for Kenny. So we've written Kenny a tune and we've named it The Bystander. Now if any's been on Twitter or the band forum websites and stuff like that, you'll see comments from this user called The Bystander and told to be known it was Kenny. And Kenny was good enough influential and hosted an argument or two as well in those forums, but the name was just great, and you'd obviously Kenny was always standing beside the street for the parades and stuff the other days, and I thought there's no better title for this tune, so we called The Bystander. And not just only for me and Richard to play, but it would be sad of us to not include the members of the Orange and Blue Flute Band, so I'd like to invite the fluters and the drummer from the Orange and Blue Flute Band who's going to join us as well for this tune called The Bystander. And hopefully we'll hear it being played down the Duncastle Road sometime in the future as well. So. very much, everybody. And just as a wee memento, we've got the tune all written out here and everything as well, so we're going to give it to Andrina. So it's a wee keepsake for you, and obviously a wee dedication to Kenny.
Thank you very much to the very talented Richard Laird and Darren Mulligan, and of course the musicians from Pride Orange and Blue. Give another round of applause. A wonderful tribute there composed by Darren. I just need to ask him, Andrina, do you get the royalties every time it's played? They get that contract signed now. Okay, folks, as we indicated earlier on, as say one of Kenny's great loves was storytelling. So the next segment of the celebration is exactly that. We're going to bring together a few of Kenny's friends to reflect and recount a few of their individual stories. It's going to be compared by the incomparable Norman Rosma. He's going to introduce you shortly to James Key. James is a lifelong friend of Kenny and also more recently a working colleague out at Solus and here at Newgate. John Laughlin, who I think was a younger friend of Kenny's, getting up to development in Faugham Valley School and heading to Spurs games whenever they actually got to cup finals and stuff like that. And Ruth, who we mentioned earlier on, who was part of the team out at New Boltons whenever they were working towards the community association out there. And last but by no means least, we're going to have John's John Taylor, the bandmaster at his Pride, the Pride of Orange and Blue. So hopefully you'll enjoy this conversation. Do you, Norman?
Good evening, everyone. Helen, start the car. Good evening, everyone. That's much better. Thank you all for joining us once again. We continue to celebrate the life and legacy of Mr. Kenny McFarland. What a turnout. We're most pleased Kenny's family is here with us tonight. You're all very welcome and very brave, considering that you already knew that I'd be hosting these proceedings. You know what they say, never trust an old man with a microphone. I'm at the stage now where I don't care what I say anymore. I'm so old, I went into an antique shop the other day and they wouldn't let me leave. No, honestly, most sincerely, you're all very welcome, and I know it's going to be a bit emotional, but I'm sure we'll hear a few light-hearted or fun moments along the way. Through the years, Kenny left an indelible mark on an awful lot of people. In the band hall, community halls, on the marching scene, countless shared moments filled with his warmth, wit and unwavering spirit. With the help of some of our friends, we'll attempt to bring to light the many dimensions of the true legend, Kenny McFarland. Now, the panel in front of you is not a PSNI lineup, nor are they the next controversial act to appear in Glastonbury, or Glastonbury as it's now known as. No, a few of them are here because they think that if they take part tonight it goes towards the community service, but it doesn't. Now, it's made up of people who knew Kenny through different chapters of his life, schoolmates, band members, community colleagues, and each of them bring stories and reflections that together begin to paint a fuller picture of the man who was so admired. Tonight is not just about remembering, it's about honouring the many ways Kenny inspired people, supported people, and made people laugh. So let's honour him in the way he loved, by sharing openly and keeping his memory alive through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Once again, I'll introduce the panel. John Laughlin, James Key, John Taylor, and Ruth Moore. First up is John. It tells me he's in great form tonight because he read his horoscope in the sun and all the stars have aligned and this, which is rubbish because John's star sign isn't even in the astrological calendar. John's birth sign is Pyrex. He was a test tube baby. John, I'll ask you first. You knew Kenny for a long, long time. So how did you first meet?
Me?
Yes?
We're wondering which John you were talking to.
The one with the most money, that's you.
By the way, he was the first test tube baby born out of a bottle of Guinness. He had a slender body but a lovely head.
So, how did you first meet Kenny?
Well, when we run around New Buildings, sort of wild in them days, sort of was Foyle Crescent, where everybody knew everybody. That's where I lived. I was brought up, and then they built Primity, which there was a lot, them days when Primity was first built, believe it or not, would have been 50-50 relation-wise, because there was a lot of people, how would I put it, they were better from Bogside and Craigan, that when the army came in to start, some of their sisters or someone met up with soldiers and they ended up marrying them. So when things turned bad, they turned against them. Of course, where'd they land? New Buildings. So in them days, we sort of had to stand up for ourselves, and there would be no Orange and Blue Flute Band if we had it. We had to do that. But Kenny was a couple of years younger than me, but one of the things I was just thinking about today when I seen James sent me through the questions, thank you very much, James, was Norman. But I was wondering what he had wrote them. But anyway.
Joined up writing, sir?
I didn't know you could write.
Well.
But anyway. On them days, you seen all the troubles in the TV, and we were around 14, 15, around that. And all you seen on the TV was the UDA and all this. So we started our own NDA, New Buildings Defence Association. There were about 15 or 20 of us. I wonder now what it was all about. All we done was march up and down the railway line. And Peter Barnett was the music, he played the accordion. Big Barney.
Sorry, what age were you then?
About 14, 15.
Right. I wonder Kenny didn't apply for funding for it.
Well, he was looking into it. But where the dump, they built the dump in New Buildings, there used to be a bit of a forest there. Of course, that was the headquarters. We built this hut. And the only thing, believe it or not, we done was, I was the commander, by the way. Keep that to yourselves. Right, there was a farmer across the railway line topping a field. I think he was Duncan McGonigal. And I sent them over to stone him. Of course, he didn't take it too kind. He came down, the whole lot of us. Well, that's the only time we run right enough. He was down after us. Kenny says, that was a bad idea. I says, tell me now. But then we cut this big branch looking for, we were going to make a flagpole. Of course, there was a whole argument. No, it needs, that's 20 foot, and somebody else says, no, it's 15, that's 20. Kenny says, well, son, know in a minute, and he took it back down, got out a tape measure. And mine, Peter Barnett, standing looking at me, and he says, gee, he says, what that bloody idiot? He says, it's the fucking height we're looking for, not the length. But during school, you were saying about, it was all Fawn Valley School, believe it or not, was a good school. There was, because everybody knew everybody. And probably most of them was from New Buildings, so there was never no fights or arguments. But well, Kenny wouldn't have fought anyway, because as everybody knew Kenny was just, you couldn't fall out with him.
Were there any incidents you can remember at Fawn Valley where the New Buildings boys had to stand up for themselves against pupils from other areas? Because there was a wee bit of rivalry at secondary schools, you know, when the testosterone was rising and people were trying to claim their own turf. Was there any hassle? Or
not really, no. It was, well, nobody messed with us.
The NDA? Definitely not.
We were in full flight.
That's right.
At that stage, we were building bow and arrows.
So, well, fast forward, as the years rolled by, did you and Kenny still remain friends?
Kenny always come down to me because we were always, me and him was, I think we used to hold our meetings in the phone box, Spurs Supporters Club. But they all joking
You could
aside,
get all the
Ken-
NDA into the phone box too.
No, there were too many of them. No, but Kenny used to come down. I lived in Foyle. I had moved away when I got married. I was living in Easted for a while, so I hadn't really seen. I would have seen Kenny when I was out playing in the band,
Yes.
the group. But when I moved back in, Kenny started to come down because we were always watching. Them days there were no Sky TV, so if Kenny wanted a drink, he couldn't go into Smaller and Fuller and watch it. So they always used to come down to my house, and Kenny and a young lad down the street, actually a next door neighbour, my mother's, David Nelson. Well, he was only young then, he was Spurs mad. So in 1981, Spurs were playing Man City, and we were all sitting where I lived in Foyle Crescent. It was actually beside Bell Patterson's. You know where one of it, Jim Campbell lives there now, that house. We're all sitting watching the match, and the next thing I seen Kenny get hit the floor. I didn't know what was happening. It was one of the crows that stole the feller's car, and he was drunk. He came round the corner, come in through my garden and hit the window. The window was about that height. They were all sitting along the window. So it ended up there about five of us lying top of each other on the floor. We're all straight now, by the way.
Ish.
Well, and then the next year Spurs got to the final again. They were playing QPR, and Kenny and us seen this thing in the paper, Belfast Telegraph, £120, 2 nights, tickets for the match. So me and him and Norrie Nelson next, because we didn't really want to take him, he was only 14. Dave, would you take David and I'll pay? Oh, all right then. So me and Kenny headed off, and David, Kenny organised, as you know, he organised everything, and we landed. We were staying in the Regent Palace in Soho. Lovely place. And we were staying there, and we met up with these 3 guys from Belfast. They were over for the match as well. They were good crack now, I have to say. And so that Friday night we went out, we got something to eat and a few drinks. Andrina, are you going to the toilet? All right. All right. And this is a true story. Now we're walking up the street, and the Belfast lads, and this colour gear come over to me. I don't know, how you doing? Like from your mountains, we didn't know what was going on. And after I went away, Kenny came over to me and says, what she say to you? She says, £30 to sleep with me. Kenny says, what'd you say? I said, but I'm not that tired, but it would do with the money. That's true. He looked at me, he knew I was only joking, man. I says, no, seriously, she did say, that's what happened. Jesus, he says, what kind of place is this? So we had a great weekend, and that night then we were in the Regent Palace. Of course, we were in the hotel, and young Nelson, he was playing up a bit. I told him, right, get you up the stairs and go to your bed. So we were standing again, and the Belfast boys and all were having a few pints. Lady of the night come over again. He says, look, no, we're not interested, but look, go up to room 144. Young Nelson didn't know what hit him. I can still remember Kenny laughing, but good times, and I have to say, Kenny was a great, I never knew anybody to say a bad word about Kenny. He also took me in, he was a big Linfield man. Kenny used to organise all the buses. Me and him, or well, it was Kenny organised, but I was there too, but Northern Ireland matches and Linfield. And I remember we went up to Cliftonville against Linfield, as you know, in some final. It was during the week. As you would know, it's like Rangers against Celtic. So up we went. But Kenny and this guy, to this day I can't remember his name, but he knew him through the men. And he says, this boy, he lived up here, he works up here. That was alright after the match. Was where Cliftonville beat Linfield, but we got into Ecky Donald's minibus. That was another experience. Yes. He rung the AA. He says, Ecky broke down one time, he rung the AA. He says, where are you? He says, I'm outside a village called Danger Goslow. He says, could you spell it? The boy in the AA says, you bucking idiot, that's danger, go slow. But anyway, we went. This guy, he knew a shortcut. Oh, I know a shortcut, we'll get out of here. So we were on the minibus. Remember, can't remember, one boy I do remember was there, if he's all mine, him, Derek Rutherford. Lived New Miltons. The guy took us, where did he land us? He landed us in the middle of the markets, Belfast. If any of you know where that is. And all I seen was down the two sides of the road, Cliftonville fans, them shouting and singing. And we were sitting in a traffic jam at Ecky's minibus. I said, what? Start singing, shaking the bus as if we're, let on we're one of them. And the next thing I looked round, Derek Rutherford was hanging a big fucking Union Jack at the back of the bus. And the rowers are queuing, get that bucket down, get that down. Ecky, we got down the end of the traffic lights, he drove through the traffic lights and over an island. This, well, you know Ecky's buses. So we finally were on the way home. No, Connie was telling my wife this the night, she says, don't be telling that. We're going up the Glen Sheehan, the bus started to boil. What are we going to do? This is about 12 o'clock at night, we couldn't get into somebody's house, so somebody had an empty cider bottle, we all made our water in the cider bottle. And needless to say, we got up past the Ponderosa, we had to tell Ecky to turn the heater off. You would have smelt it here.
Thanks for that, John.
By the way, keep that to yourselves.
It's available for weddings, christenings and bar mitzvahs. See me afterwards. John Taylor, we'll come to you next. When you first came into contact with Kenny, was it through the band scene, or did you know Kenny before that?
Kenny's my cousin.
Well, that would explain a lot.
I was born out in the family.
But did you know him? Did you really know him?
Oh,
I have to ask before we go any further, was Kenny a member of Foyle Defenders?
He was.
From the start? So he would have been a very young man,
From the start.
young fellow when he...
Well, he was a member of the Foyle Defenders, and then when he left...
As I say, he would have been mid-teens, would he, when he...
when we left the Foyle Defenders, they done a year with Bertald.
Right.
They started Orange Blue. So, Kenny and Barney and John Keys, they went marched with Bertald for a year, and then they formed Orange Blue then, 79.
You spent those first few years gathering the experience and the know-how and the skills and how to get a band up and
it was
going.
more of an experience because there wasn't much you didn't know about the bands.
So he was instrumental in forming the Pride of the Orange and Blue.
Oh, I was a founding member, like, and
by the way, folks,
I seen that.
I was sweating in case it wouldn't come
Jason,
in the post today. Just came at the last minute. Sorry, John, I interrupted you. Go on.
No, so it was instrumental in the formation of that, but at that time there wasn't many cars either, so we practiced in Cowland, and he had to do a lot of running to get people to Cowland, and even later years for Glen Stevie and Glen Abbey Colleges, and then I was in the Fountain. He would have lifted us.
So they were ferrying people back and forward to and from band
practice? We had two cars at that time, Sturdy Malloy and Kelly's Dash. So buses every road we went, you know. But if I just passed my test, when we were going up to Belfast, Sturdy Malloy's car, they picked a uniform. So Sturdy decides he wants to take a drink. McFarland says, right, you drive to her, so you passed your test now. Fuck's sake, I never seen traffic lights on a roundabout and nearly got us killed. No, I says, who the hell put traffic lights for the roundabout? McFarland says, Jesus, no. And so it was always an experience. So I was young then, like, so kind of sort of shaped my life. As I'm doing that, well, tell you. Hey, no.
You know, when Kenny was still a young man when he got the Pride of the Orange and Blue up and going, you know, decision making can be a tricky thing within an organisation, especially bands, as you all know. When you come to a compromise, it means that neither side or neither party is 100% satisfied. But how did Kenny cope with these problems so well? I mean, he always seemed to get everyone on his side in the end.
Kenny was that easy going. He just seemed to talk his way, and there was never rows or, he just had to talk his way through things, and we never had no rows or. As well, only one trip he lost the head was we went to Edinburgh. And he was in charge, Big Bernie couldn't go. So Kenny was in charge, and we were all about 17, couldn't control us. Jesus. Oh, Jesus, big boys, I ended up out in the scaffold in the mattress sleeping. And he lost me and Bobby Moyes, Bobby's there too tonight. And he was worried about what I was going to say, he lost 2 cousins. So I think I always had prepared him to have 3 daughters. He was nearly finished with the band that time. But it was good crack now. But it was always easy going, I never heard Kenny a cross word.
No.
You know.
Right.
And it's hard now when you're running a band to keep it calm. No.
But
It's
it
right,
managed.
Johnny.
Thanks very much for that. John Taylor, everyone. Move on to you now, James. Your first impressions of Kenny, what was it that brought, or the circumstances that brought the two of you together? What were your first impressions of him?
Well, just to reflect on the band area first, for those who don't know, Kenny was in Kelly Clooney Pipe Band as a drum major. So Kenny did don the Royal Stuart tartan back in about 1969-70. And Kenny was only in the band a couple of years. By the way, I wasn't born then. And circumstances where they lived in the city at that time was challenging, and unfortunately couldn't continue as a member of the pipe band, so I did step in as drum major, as a very young drum major after Kenny had left. Look, it was mainly through community development, Norman, and I suppose I was trying to take a few notes down the night or today, and I ended up with about 14 A3 pages, and I had to compress it into one A5 page here. But one of the best decisions, and just to come back from John there, I'm going to bring everything back down to earth a wee bit now. And I see Derek Donald in the audience there. I was asked to sit on an interview panel to interview people that was taken over from the well in villages together. And Kenny was one of the candidates. And there was about 6 candidates all together, and they had the option. They had to do a 10-minute presentation. First couple of people come in, it was a PowerPoint presentation. We got the projector set up in that wee cottage up in Brady. There was one guy come in with like a 32-page manual, and I think Kenny might have been 4th out of 6, and I have no doubt that Alison had a hand in this here. He came in with a big A3 page all rolled up and below his arm, and a wee bit of blue tack. So he stuck this A3 page to the wall, and the detail on it was unbelievable. But when I say it's one of the best decisions we ever made, and that's where it started with Kenny, full-time employment and community development. So I think, Derek, you'll agree with me, it was a good decision we made that day, under the circumstances, considering there was about 6 people there, but we did pick the best candidate, and that's proved to the day. Some other wee things, Norman, and after that then, we met in the Orange Hall, because at that time Kenny was with others, and they built a great team of new buildings there to create the Solace Centre, New Buildings Community Centre. And then at that time he says, we're going to build one here in Brady as well. Is that right, Kenny? So we started what you call the Friday Rant Club. We went down for lunch at 1 o'clock on a Friday in the main part of the hall, and we had what you call the Rant Club, and whoever came in was invited to join it, you know.
Yep.
So Kenny, the team that he had built, whether it was Lexi McFeeters and Alison and Ruth and back at that time even Davy Nicol was on board to help us up in Brady at that time. So we invited Ruth up to the Orange Hall. There was myself, Kenny, and Ruth must remember for she's starting to laugh already. But and Bertie Campbell. Ruth came into the Orange Hall. She says, "Look, see folks, could I use the ladies before we start the meeting here?" And we all looked at each other because we knew the standard of the ladies in the Orange Hall at that time. And well, I think you said, Ruth, what's wrong? Is there mice in it or something? And Kenny says the mice wouldn't even go into it. So that was the first time that Kenny introduced us to Ruth and some of the support that we needed. But through the initiative of New Buildings and Kenny and all the rest of them down there, there would be very, very little community infrastructures in this part of the world only for that initiative and leadership. Even a centre of excellence like Brady Cricket Club, you know, it was that initiative, and there was mistakes made whenever the capital build was happening in New Buildings, but what that meant was that Brady didn't do it. They had less mistakes, and that initiative worked right through. And I would say there's at least 6 capital build community centres in the country, thanks to what Kenny and his team did back then. And the first purpose-built Ulster Scots Centre, the Solace Centre, speaks for itself. And but not only had Kenny support and ideas from the Rant Club about capital builds, but he came up with this after 2011. It was we had 18 dancers, the Solace dancers, in the Edinburgh Military Tattoo, and we came back. And Kenny says, "We're going to do our own tattoo here someday." I says, "Catch yourself, do your own tattoo." Of course, 2013 come, UK City of Culture. Kenny says, "Right, get on there, you boy." And he knew I was silly enough to attempt it. But Kenny McFarland, the Wall City Tattoo, people think, oh, James Key done this and James Key done that. If it wasn't for Kenny McFarland and people and the team that was created around us, that wouldn't have happened. So that coming from the Friday Rant Club as well. You find this hard to believe, and I don't know if I even told Andrina this here, but Kenny got involved in costume design, the dancers' outfits and everything else. Did I ever tell you that? Unreal, man of many talents, and like somebody said, I think Barney said earlier on, you get into an odd wee heated debate with him, but the bugger was that crafty that once we were sitting around the table at lunchtime and maybe I was getting the better of him, he'd always say, "What do you think, Mandy?" Knowing rightly that Mandy would jump on board with him to support him. So that was that. But that was the tactics of Kenny McFarland.
I was just about to ask you about, you know, he was known for his powers of persuasion. So you've answered the question before I've even asked it. He roped other people in, and
he never beat Kenny.
No.
He never beat Kenny. Brian said earlier on, Kenny McFarland was probably the greatest strategist that we have ever had in this part of the world. And we actually tried to encourage him one time to stand for local politics. We even planted up a shirt, we vote McFarland #1. But Kenny was having none of it, and you know what, it's a good job he didn't, for the might have, you know, it might not have helped Kenny to be stuck in the middle of the forum there. He was more beneficial and to us on the outside.
he had that ability, didn't he, to make people approach things in a different path. You know, he could find common ground, identify it, and move in and utilise it to the benefit of most people. And the thing that I always remember is that, you know, when decision making is not easy, and the proper decision is not always the most popular one, but Kenny seemed to have the ability to persuade people to go with what he said. For instance, Mark Roxburgh, who works out of this place here, was telling me he was having a particular problem with bonfires, resolving bonfires and tricolours on one thing or another, you know. And he asked Kenny for a bit of advice, and he says, "Look, don't approach it head on. That's a big rock, and you're not going to move it on your own." He says, "Start digging around it, slowly, slowly, catchy monkey." He says, "Dig around it and dig around it again, and it'll come loose." And he says, "When you're digging around it, you're getting all those people on your side." And he says, "Eventually, you'll move that rock." And he did. And I can remember too, we had a similar evening up in the Fountain Primary School one time, and there was a panel, and Kenny was on it. There was John Rankin and Dennis Lamrock, sadly no longer with us, Kenny and Billy Moore. And it was a revelation to sit and listen to what Kenny had to say that night, because he made a lot of predictions that are starting to come true. He spoke a lot of sense, and that was when I first got a great insight into the way that his mind worked. He says that, for instance, in the not too distant future, loyalists parading, we're going to have to start paying for our own police, for our own policing. We're going to have to pay the police, not because their budget's stretched, it's because they want to make it as difficult as they can for people to parade. And the man was a revolution.
To be honest, John, I always said that Kenny wasn't just influential on all the capital build projects that they had. He didn't just build centres. Kenny McFarland built a lot of us and here to what we are today.
Right, we'll move on to you, Ruth, now. You've been looking forward to this all night. So, what was it that brought you into contact with Kenny in the first place? Was it the community work that you were doing, or?
Well, that was a nice segue on to, I suppose.
Is your microphone on?
Maybe not. I think it's just, where James ended there in terms of,
222.
Yes, she's on.
There, I'm on. Where James ended there in terms of, Kenny, he made us. I met Kenny then in 1996 and kind of worked closely with Kenny for about 5 years. And there's people in this room who've worked with him a lot longer. I know him a lot deeper, but I kind of felt that we made a really genuine kind of connection through work. For me, that was kind of like my fourth head official job kind of thing. I wasn't from Derry, I was from Fermanagh. At that time, it was a formative kind of part of my kind of working life, the job that I got in New Buildings with the Community Association. But it was also a really formative time for community development. There'd been, within the Catholic community, there'd been a number of kind of community associations and some of the funders that get funding community workers. And whilst there was lots and lots of people in the community, my job was to kind of come along and help animate and create a kind of community development plan for New Buildings. I didn't have a lot of animation to do. There was a lot going on, and I suppose, like I'm sitting here as a woman, but there's lots of women in this room, and who were really active in New Buildings. Doris there, Naomi, Alison. There's lots and lots of people, and women. And I think the thing with Kenny, he knew how to be with women. He raised a family of girls. He also supported a lot of the women that were there in communities. So I suppose I got to know him really just through that opportunity of work, and it was a really important opportunity for me, and it's where I learned an awful lot about community development and good community development practice. And for me, it was like a precursor to a lot of what we've heard about, that was 30 years ago. I met, Kenny really, in some ways my introduction to Kenny was more as a volunteer with the youth club. That's what he was kind of passionate about, and that whole kind of, that we talk about building the infrastructure, those kind of things don't just happen. That was kind of like he could see that his community was underserved. He really wanted better for it, but he really, really supported the volunteers and the people putting the effort in. And I think the thing for me, I see Kenny really kind of like he was an anchor. There were other people at the front of the room. If you scan the room, Kenny was at the back, holding it at the back and bringing people with him. He was with his people, kind of thing, and he brought people along. Yeah. On that kind of journey, and that's kind of how I see him and the role and the influence he had.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are your memories of Kenny regarding achievements, teamwork and forward thinking?
Yeah, well, I suppose, Kenny was actually driving the bus at the time. It was when I met Kenny, when you Kenny, this was before he got the job in the Villages Together. I can remember my heartbeat in the mouth the time he actually got the job, because I knew the precarious nature of community work and year-to-year contracts. I'm going, how is he going to support his family? I was really nervous for him, but he did an awful lot and achieved an awful lot of since then. But back then, the whole kind of process of taking a voluntary youth club through, training up volunteer youth leaders to get their accreditation, to become qualified, to kind of negotiate with the Education Library Board to become a full-time youth club. Kenny was there every step of that way, and that all needed to happen before we could even actually begin to think about funding for a building, and begin to get a full-time youth worker. So there's a whole lot of stuff, a lot of small achievements that kind of built to become significant achievements. That whole kind of thing around the youth club, the development of the infrastructure and the community centre there. For me, Kenny was someone who, you know, he kind of, somebody I went to then, you know, in terms of, you know, if you just wanted to kind of test out an idea or take a temperature check for the community, he always wanted to get to be engaged in the band as well in some way, and looking at the whole kind of cultural exploration. But for me, this is all stuff that came way before the bands for kind of worked, you know. I can remember we got a small grant called Our Past, Our Present, Our Future. And that was like kind of looking at the history and heritage of New Belgium's pre-plantation and post-plantation. And that kind of evolved into like creating a cross-community history group in New Belgium's. And Kenny was supporting that. We also then started a little drumming project. I don't know, John, if you remember that. It was kind of the beginning of exploring culture and cultural expression. You know, and that was 2000 millennium, you know, and like I think it was £3,000, but we kind of thought we got £30 million. You know, it was a small amount, and we did a lot with it. And Kenny was there all through that.
There's a rumour, or I heard, an infamous visit to Fermanagh on a supposed community trip. Are there any personal stories that you would like to recall?
Well, I don't remember that.
Was that good? You don't remember it?
Somebody else can tell that story. I think the thing I like about Kenny is he knew what stories not to tell.
We were talking earlier as regards legacy. You know, as far as you and Kenny are concerned, well, what is that legacy?
I think the thing for me, like, you know, it was a working relationship, but it became a very deep, like it became just a real respect and a real kind of genuine friendship. And we, you know, Kenny's house was an open door to me, and there was many a long ceilidh. You know, and his family had to look at me a lot and share their supper with me on occasion. You know, so there's just a genuine friendship and respect there, you know, and we could talk. We didn't always agree on everything, but we spent many a night trying to kind of sort the world out. So, you know, there was that kind of just visionariness there, and I think a willingness to be kind of critical as well. Like, he wanted better for the community, but he also wanted the community to do better. He you know, in terms of speaking up for itself and representing itself better. You know, so there's many of a conversation around politics and in the house. I think his legacy, you know, I mean, obviously the centre and the infrastructure and the buildings are all really big part of the legacy, and you know, this place in particular is very symbolic. But for me, the other legacy that I think we can all kind of take forward at Kenny McFarland is, you know, he was an example of how to be a human being, an absolutely brilliant human being. You know, and he always showed up. He was always there, you know. So I just think, like, if we take all that away and if we can carry that forward, you know, just in terms of showing up and speaking up and standing for what we believe in, and but he, you know, he really cared, and yeah, let's just try and continue that on.
Yeah, lovely. Ruth Murray, everyone. Can I just quickly wind this up now, well, not quickly, but John Taylor, you know, briefly, how would you remember or best describe Kenny, you know, in a few sentences?
Well, Kenny wasn't just with family. Kenny was a friend
Yes.
to everybody, and it doesn't matter. You always had time to chat to anybody, and it was never a quick chat. It was an hour, at least. So that's the best I can say. No, you could so easy with Kenny. You could have chatted to him all day, no problem.
Yeah. No. John Loughlin. How would you best remember Kenny?
He never lent me that 30 quid.
No.
All joking aside, a lot of people doesn't know Willard, Kenny and Alison that time. I remember when it was me and all morning, Kenny meet the lottery people about the football pitch. But Kenny was, no, well, I'm going to tell him this, why do we play matches? Brian, no, Kenny just settled down. He settled down, and he told us what they say, and it worked.
Yeah.
So, you know, they all talk what Kenny done for the community. He also done for New Buildings, the community centre, the football pitch. He was a big part, and I'd never heard And all my time, man, it was about the village. You never heard anybody saying a bad word about Kenny. Kenny was a gentleman.
That seems to be absolutely
gentleman.
true. James, summing up, well, what's your most fondest memory? How would you describe Kenny, you know, how you remember him?
Well, I suppose, you know, we started off by saying about Kenny's storytelling and all the rest of it, and my goodness, like Kenny laughed the whole way through his own stories. You know, and he had a new story every day. I know one saying that because I've known him that long, I've heard them all 20 times each. But there's the one that I don't know if it was you, Oliver, or who it was, but he came up and he started to laugh at lunchtime one day, and we knew there was a story coming. And he says, and he was tapping and he was whistling, and he says, and the drumstick went through the mirror or the TV. I'm not too sure. What was this boy here? But Kenny just laughed the whole way through it. Man, they would tell you, the grandma's the drumstick slipped out, he said, "Went through a TV." And him laughing away like a good one. But it was the sayings, and I will make an effort sometime. Anybody that's ever been in my office, there's A4 pages stuck up on the wall, and Kenny used to bring them into me. And some of the sayings was, I would have went to a meeting and still do in Newton Savile, which is about 45 minutes away. And if things didn't go too well, I come out hands-free in the car, phone Kenny. Now, 45 minutes later, I was sitting outside my house and I was still chatting to Kenny. And he'd always say, "James, don't you worry about them. Them boys are only managing decline. That's all they're doing." You know, so that was one of the sayings. A couple of other ones, and there's so many up on that wall. Learning to be calm when you're disrespected is poor. You know, hard-hitting things like, you know, settle yourself down, James, and, you know, just don't be raising your voice too much, gain respect type of thing. In life, it's important to know when to stop arguing with people and simply let them be wrong.
I like that one.
Kenny lands on with these. Facts and figures was the big one. You know, instead of getting there raising your voice, facts and figures. But the one that Brian that has already alluded to, and thanks to Kenny, our community doesn't suffer from that anymore. It's the lack, or what is a poverty of aspiration. We lack a poverty of aspiration, but we can no longer say that thanks to the man called Kenny McFarland.
And Ruth, briefly, how would you like to remember Kenny?
I think for me, it was just like a really decent human being, and he was the glue and the connective tissue.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've had a bit of fun unravelling the legend, the true legend that was Kenny McFarland. Thank you very much, John, James, and Ruth. I'll now hand you back over to Brian.
Thank you, Norman. And our panelists say, as we said earlier on, Kenny loved the story, and it was great to hear other people reflecting on their stories as well. Next up, we're going to have another element of culture that Kenny loved. As James alluded to, he was instrumental in developing the Solus Centre and the Solus Highland Dancers. I'm not too sure if he helped design the uniforms, but I'm sure he'd been delighted to see a reflection of that. And we've got quite a number of young ones here, and a family connection as well. We've got Kenny's granddaughter Abigail dancing this evening, along with Emily, Charlie, two Emilys, Haley, Lily, and Lily as well. And I think Darren here is going to join us on the pipes as well. So enjoy the Solus Highland Dancers. thank the Soul Skyline dancers and to Darren for accompanying them there on the pipes. Our final act tonight is, I suppose, last but certainly not least, and the one element of Kenny's life, apart from his family, that he had most pride in. So we're going to hear a set here from John and his band, the Pride of the Orange Blue Flute Band. So guys, if you want to make your way up here. Just while the guys are setting up here, I just want to meant to mention at the start, we're doing a kind of totally voluntary collection here for causes that were close to the Kenny's heart. So on your way out, perhaps there's a bucket here beside the door if you want to make a donation. It'll be greatly received, and as I say, we'll go to